Hi everyone, Neil Mason here from Applied Insights. So in this series of short videos, I'm discussing how to build a really offensive data and analytics strategy. In previous videos, I outlined what I mean by that, which is essentially having a strategy that focuses relentlessly on value realization and value delivery to the organization. We've discussed the three main components of a really offensive data and analytics strategy as being, firstly, having a real focus on that last mile and making the shift to decision intelligence. Secondly, developing value-based analytics products. And thirdly, creating robust value management, delivery, and tracking processes. Now, in this video, we're going to be looking at what we mean by value and how to define the value delivery from analytics products. Now, I think I first used this phrase back in the dot-com days, and yes, I do go back that far, when a colleague of mine asked me for some data. I had just finished completing the build out of a new data warehouse and business intelligence system, and the data was starting to flow around the organization. And at the time, I had a very data savvy CEO who was in the W. Edwards Deming school of thinking in terms of in God we trust, in all others must bring data. So as a result, people were keen to get their hands on the data to save themselves a potentially awkward encounter at the weekly management meeting. Consequently, I was getting pretty busy, and unwittingly, I started to use this phrase as a way of prioritizing my work. However, it stood me in good stead over the years, both as a way of shaping requirements and solutions, but also getting to the point, which is, what's the value of what you're trying to do? Now, when I think of value, I think of it in terms of two dimensions. First of all, value which is intangible or tangible. Tangible value will include financial metrics and things that are, by definition, relatively easy to measure. Intangible value, by its nature, is less obvious and harder to measure, but it doesn't mean that it's any less important. It might include things like better brand reputation, improved customer relationships, or better team culture. The other dimension is the time frame in which the value is achieved, which could be in the short term or the longer term. Now, the notion of definition of short term versus long term will naturally vary from organization to organization, depending on the nature of the business. For some, short term might mean in the next month or two, whereas for others, it could mean the next year or two. Whatever your definition, when it comes to analytics product development, generally what you are looking for initially is to deliver some short-term tangible value. Now, that's not to say that longer-term or more intangible value is not important or beneficial. It's just that in order for your product to be financially viable, it needs to be able to generate some fairly immediate return to the business. So in terms of your initial discovery work, when looking at the opportunity for analytics product development, the starting point was to map out your users or potential users' pains and gains, as we discussed in the last video. Now we need to explicitly develop from those pains and gains the value opportunity, and there are various ways you can do that. Now, what is also important is to map out how that value would be delivered, because it also becomes an important design feature of the product, and particularly its adoption amongst the user base. I think we've all been involved one way or another with some system rollout where it didn't quite live up to its expectations. Not necessarily because it didn't work, but because the processes around it weren't sufficiently thought through. Considering what the operational processes are around the product is as important as the features of the product itself. Now, we can put this all together into what I call a value realization diagram. And what this does is it defines the relationship between the pain points that have been identified in the persona work and the needs that need to be addressed by the analytics product, and then the value that would be then delivered to the organization. So on the left here, we have synthesized all the pain points that we've identified in our discovery work and the features to be developed to address them. We have also identified in the middle what changes need to be made or what improvements need to be delivered on the operational side in order to ensure that the value is delivered. For example, there's no point having a model that can, say, predict demand on a daily basis if the operational processes to manage, say, inventory levels are not able to react in the same time frame. Once the value realization diagram is complete, the next stage is to develop a KPI framework to track the value delivery from the product. At this point, it's probably worth just thinking about KPIs and what we mean by them. I think it's useful to distinguish between KPIs, key performance indicators, and KRIs, which are key results indicators. Key performance indicators are focused on what you are doing. If you like, they're the output metrics, whereas KRIs, as the acronym implies, are concerned about the results. They are essentially outcome metrics. KRIs measuring the value of what's being delivered. KPIs are telling you how well you're doing in getting there. What you should also be able to do by now is use your value realization diagram to define the right metrics for measuring the performance of the product and the processes around it and the value that's being delivered, and put that into a coherent framework which will articulate to the business its success or otherwise. So in the past couple of videos, we've been looking at how to design analytical products with a view to ensuring that they're focused on value delivery. We've created personas to identify pains and gains, finding the value opportunities, and defining the way that you would measure the delivery of that value. There's quite a lot there, but what I've done is I've designed a workshop which pulls all these things together, from creating or validating the personas, identifying short and long-term value, tangible and intangible value, and then determining what is needed to be done in order to actually deliver that value. So if you'd like to understand a bit more about how it works, then obviously please do get in touch. Next time, I'll be looking at the actual approach to building out analytics products. See you then.